Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to be here. And while we allow a few more people to join, I'd love to hear in the comments where you're joining from and what brought you here today. Maybe it's because you are responsible for planning a particular event. Maybe you're a facilitator or you just want more tips and tricks for how to make your meetings and work gatherings more effective and inclusive. Whatever it is, I'd really love to hear in the comments where you're joining us from and what you're here for. Because of the way that this masterclass is set up, it's a live stream, which means you can see me, but I cannot see you. So your interaction and feedback in the comments is really, really valuable and helps me get a sense of how you're receiving the information. I also want to make space and make this available for comments and discussion too. So if you have particular questions or feedback, I really want to hear that as we go and I can address them live as well. Before we get into it, I want to actually share a bit more about myself in case you're wondering who is this person and why are they qualified to be teaching me about this topic. I am Mallory. My pronouns are she, her, and these are some snapshots from my multicultural upbringing. I was actually born in Singapore. My mom's Chinese Singaporean, my father's French American. And when I was about 2, we moved to Northwest London. So I grew up in a family that had a lot of diversity socioeconomically, culturally, in terms of religion and beliefs. My parents' families literally were from opposite sides of the world and could not be more different. And maybe because of this, it was inevitable that I found myself into a career of facilitation and bringing diverse groups together to work together better, to understand each other's perspective so that ultimately they can collaborate better together. Prior to co-founding the Inheritance Project in 2020, my first career was as a strategy consultant at Deloitte. And there I worked on this specialist team for many years called the Greenhouse, where my full-time job was to design and facilitate executive level retreats. So I've literally created events for hundreds of different teams, everything from the C-suite of Fortune 100 companies to the boards of big nonprofits to the executive teams and leadership teams of government agencies. I've seen all different types of organizations, all different team dynamics, and I'm really passionate about this topic because gathering a team of humans together, especially in today's day and age when many of us work virtually, is such a rare opportunity to collaborate and connect in a really powerful way. And I see so many teams totally waste this opportunity or not make the most of it because of lacking some really fundamental skills and tools in planning. So I'm really excited to share some of that with you. I'll also share that I currently serve on the board of the Creative Education Foundation, whose mission is to empower people with the tools to facilitate creative problem solving and to help groups better innovate and better work together. So this is something that I'm really passionate about at all different levels of my life. And right now, I am a co-founder of the Inheritance Project, and we primarily teach leadership, facilitation, and conflict resolution skills to leaders so that whatever organization we're working with has the skills in-house to lead these kinds of events, retreats, to mediate any conflicts or interpersonal issues that can come up that so often come up on leadership teams. While we mostly focus on training, we also do facilitate executive retreats. We do conflict mediation and interventions for teams that are struggling or having issues. And we do a lot of community building and culture building programming that focuses on helping teams be really strong, resilient, and inclusive. And I'm really excited to peel back the curtain today and give you all a little bit of behind the scenes look into some of our usually secret tips and tricks that we use to make our events and our experiences so special. In fact, at this point, we've done programming for over 2,000 people, and almost 90% of our clients enthusiastically refer us to others. And the other stat that we're really proud of in the time that we've been doing this work and facilitating events for all different kinds of teams is that participants really take away actionable tools. So that's also my goal for you today, is to give you some tips and tricks that you can go away and apply right away in your work in the next event that you're planning. And I'm going to look through the comments now and see where people are joining from. We have Sarah from New Jersey, Izzy from Buffalo. Hi, Izzy. So good to see you here. Heather, Margaret from Portland, Daisy from Mexico City, Dasha from Jacksonville. Wow, it's really amazing geographic spread today. I'm also seeing that a lot of you are here because you're actually responsible for facilitating some kind of event or retreat coming up, which is awesome. So if you have particular questions about your event, feel free to put that into the comments too as we go, and I'll do my best to address them and hopefully give you some specific context for your particular group, because we've worked with, like I mentioned, all different types of organizations, from startups to public universities to big global corporations, big nonprofits. And we know that every organization has a different culture, has a different set of norms when it comes to gathering people, and every group's different. So that's something that I can't emphasize enough, is I'm going to share some general principles, but one of those principles are to really be thoughtful and put yourselves in the shoes of the participants that you're really working with, because there's no one size fits all when it comes to a gathering or retreat. It's really about making something that's really tailored to the needs and the culture of the group. So what we're going to do in the next hour or so is cover some of my top 8 fundamentals of exec retreat planning. I'm going to share some of our favorite Inheritance Project inclusive facilitation tools. These are amazing if you happen to be working with a group where you notice that the same voices keep dominating the conversation. Maybe it's the people with the most privilege or highest up in the hierarchy, or maybe just people who tend to be the most extroverted. It's really common for dynamics to develop on teams where the same few people are always talking, and for a variety of different reasons. And so we really like to put in place very intentional structures in our meetings and events to invite contributions from everyone so that you're not leaving any really valuable ideas on the table. We'll also talk a little bit about why icebreakers can be so awkward. And I'll offer you 1 or 2 suggestions for how to create an icebreaker or connection activity that is actually meaningful and enjoyable for your group. And we'll have some time for Q&A. So that's what we're going to do today. If that sounds good, give me a thumbs up in the comments. And the one thing I wanted to also share is that at Inheritance Project, even when we usually do virtual events, we love to make them as interactive as possible. We're usually always doing different types of exercises, engaging different modalities, being in breakout groups. It's usually very dynamic because of the format of this today being a live stream. It's going to be a little more of me talking and giving information than we usually would do in any of our workshops, retreats, or events. However, I do want to start with the individual reflection exercise for all of you. So wherever you are, if you can, I invite you to actually take a minute to close your eyes or lower your gaze if you prefer. Regardless, the invitation is to take a moment to disconnect from your external surroundings and turn your attention inwards into a more reflective space. And take a few deep breaths here, breathing deep into the belly and letting your breath go, perhaps starting to slow down your breath. And as you sit here breathing, I want you to bring to mind an event that you attended that was particularly meaningful to you. It could be a professional event like a retreat, a conference, a meeting, a strategy session, or it could be something from your personal life like a wellness retreat or a gathering of friends or a celebration. Just pick the first one that comes to mind that feels meaningful to you. And I'd love for you from this reflective space to revisit your experience at the event, starting from when you first received the invitation to when you first entered the physical or virtual space, to the experience throughout the event, to the moment of leaving, and any follow-up that was offered. Revisit that journey. And I want you to make note of any moments that were particularly meaningful or made an impact to you in your journey from the first invitation and the first entry all the way through to exiting and the follow-up, if there was any. Let's take a few more moments of individual silent reflection, which we so rarely get the opportunity to do in this day and age. And when you feel ready, you're welcome to gently open your eyes, rejoin the space. And I'd love for you to share in the comments one thing that made this particular event or gathering really special. And I particularly want you to pick something that was an intentional choice or action by the organizers. So for example, if you chose your sister's wedding, obviously that was a meaningful event by the nature of the event itself. But I want you to think of what is one thing that the person or the team who organized this put into place that made it really meaningful. And I'd love to see those in the comments so we can all get a little bit of inspiration before we dive in deeper. We have the way the organizers engage the participants ahead of time to shape the agenda. This is amazing. So inviting collaboration and inviting people to contribute to a retreat or event in some way can help people feel really engaged and part of it and make it more meaningful to them from the very beginning. And we have blending of professional and personal development. That's really beautiful and something that we really value at Inheritance Project. When we say inheritance, for those of you who are new to us, we're not just talking about physical property or money. We're talking about everything that we inherit from past generations, which includes our culture, our values, our beliefs, our ways of seeing the world, the stories we were told about ourselves and each other. We inherit so much that is invisible. And it's a core part of our philosophy that what we inherit deeply shapes us as professionals, as leaders. It shapes the way we communicate, the way we interact with other people. And so integrating aspects of personal development and personal story into professional spaces can be so valuable if done the right way to create more and more insight. Okay, we have a few other responses. Opportunities for choice. Love that. Giving people choice in how they have the experience. Attention to the details. And knowing in advance what presenters would be available. So setting clear expectations and making sure people know what to expect so they can properly plan and know how to show up. Amazing. So we will get in deeper into more of these, but I'm really glad that we started to get our juices flowing about what makes a really good event, because we've all attended so many events in our lives. We know the things from our own experience that make them really effective. So that's what I want to encourage you all today, is to draw on your own experience and remember, what are those little touches, those moments of intention that were so meaningful to you in your experiences, and how can you bring that to the events that you're creating for your team? So let's get into some of my executive retreat planning fundamentals. And the first one seems really basic and obvious. It's to begin planning 2 to 3 months in advance. You don't know how many calls I receive from teams to, saying something like, hey, we have this really important event for our whole executive team. We really need a facilitator and someone to help create it. Also, it's next week, which obviously is not ideal. And it takes a lot of time and care and thought if you want to create an experience that's as meaningful as the ones that you're all writing about in the comments. It takes time to plan. And several of you mentioned the advance notice, the expectation settings, the engagement of participants before the event itself. If you want to do that in a meaningful way, you really have to start planning 3 months in advance and start those first communications 3 to 4 weeks before the event so that you have enough time. And this is not just so that you can book a venue, get it on people's calendars, and deal with all of those logistics, which, yes, are really important, but also so you can have enough time to get input from all the people who are going to come, to really be thoughtful about what you're going to create. I believe that rushing is one of the things that really gets in the way of having events and experiences be really, really meaningful. The second is start with the end in mind, which sounds, again, really obvious, but I see that a lot of teams do things in the opposite way around. They start with, okay, let's book a great venue, let's book some speakers, and then we'll figure out how to weave it all together, versus starting with, okay, how do I want people to feel at the end of this event? What do I want people to walk away with in terms of content, insight, information, connection, but also in terms of feeling? That really famous Maya Angelou quote, people will forget what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. I probably messed up the exact wording of that quote, but you all know the idea, right? When we say start with the end in mind, we're not just talking about tangible goals like I want my team to create a strategic plan. We're also talking about the feelings that we want people to have, the quality of the experience, and the sense of connection that you want people to have by the end of the event. Do you want people to leave feeling really reflective? Or do you want people to leave feeling super energized and full of momentum? You're going to design differently depending on your end goal, not just in terms of the content, but also in terms of the feeling. The third thing, which again sounds super basic, but this is why this is the fundamentals, is to involve your most senior stakeholders from the beginning. You also don't know how many experiences I've been in where we've been working with someone, then they're like, okay, actually, we need to double check the plan with the CEO a week before the event, but I'm sure they'll be aligned. It'll be totally fine. And then it turns out they have a completely different vision or direction for what they want the gathering to be. And we're never consulted or never given the opportunity to give input. And so now for us, when we do any kind of retreats with other organizations, with our clients, it's a really important part of our process that we bring in all the most senior stakeholders and leaders for one-on-one conversations and interviews so they can give their perspective and their input, which is usually so valuable in to shape the content of the event. Just like I think it was Izzy who was saying, you know, involving people in giving their input before the event itself helps them feel a part of it. So you can do this not obviously just with the most senior stakeholders, but with everyone who's attending too, and really getting people's input. I think I noticed that a lot of our mainstream business work culture in the US has this belief that I need to figure this all out on my own. I need to come to the table first with a really, you know, polished plan and present that and get people to buy into it. But I actually know from my own experience that that individualistic way creates less good outcomes than when we actually take the time to generously invite and involve people in the process in ways that feel really good and meaningful to them. The fourth is design for your goals. Again, this sounds super simple, but I've seen a lot of teams, again, do things the opposite way around. So one great example is picking a great venue or location before you actually think about what is going to be the content or the purpose of the event. So one great example of this was we were called in to facilitate this executive strategy retreat for the executive team of this big global beverage company. And we arrived there. It's this resort in Connecticut. It's so beautiful by the water. They're in this converted farmhouse, which is a really beautiful place to stay. And then we ask, where's the actual workshop session going to be? And we find out that the only space available for it is this tiny room in the basement with no natural light and a huge pool table that's nailed to the floor that we can't move, which is obviously not ideal for, you know, having a strategy session where you want people to be in breakout groups and conversation, where you want people to be able to move around and exchange ideas. So that's just an example of why it's really important to start with end in mind and then pick a location and programming that actually supports your goals. I know a lot of people want to rush into confirming details like, okay, if we have a location set, if we have some keynote speakers set, then like the event is kind of done and I feel less stressed that it's mostly organized. But actually taking the time to really intentionally define your goals and then make choices about your location and your programming to support that is really, really important. The fifth is write the story of the experience. One of our main pillars of our methodology at Inheritance Project is storytelling. And this is shaped in large part by my co-founder, Katya, her experience as a trained actor and creator of immersive theater experiences. And there's so much research now showing how humans learn through story. This is the fundamental form of human communication. And so what we love to do is think of every experience or event that we plan as a story with a beginning, a middle, and end, usually a moment of conflict or tension somewhere in the middle that leads to some kind of resolution. And really thinking through the experience from the participant's perspective, not just what are we going to do at 9 o'clock? What are we going to do at 11 o'clock? What are we going to do at 12 o'clock? And having all these separate presenters or separate experiences, but instead thinking of the day as one arc, one journey, one story that people get guided through, can be really valuable to make it feel like a cohesive experience, not just a series of different speakers, for example. The sixth is to maximize interaction. So this, I would say, is the biggest missed opportunity of most teams who come to us for experience design consultation or for support planning events like this, is, this is the one opportunity usually when everyone's coming together in person. Sometimes people are flying from across the world who never usually get to see each other. This is your one time to be human to human, flesh to flesh together in the real physical space. And I've seen so many teams, initially start with the idea of, okay, we'll just have a bunch of presentations or a bunch of speakers, which is, can deliver really good content, but you can do that over Zoom. You can do that as a video before the event itself. So I really encourage you to think about, if you want people to take away specific content from your event or retreat, how much of that can you actually give to people as pre-work in advance, either as a video, as information to read, something more fun and interactive, like an interactive quiz or workbook that you can make online. There are so many ways that you can deliver information asynchronously, so that when you're actually physically together in the space, whether it's virtual or physical, that you can actually spend the time engaging with each other, sharing ideas, being in dialogue, the things that you can't do when we're working in our separate remote locations behind our own individual screens. So as much as you can do, think about how to make that content delivery something you can do outside the retreat, and make sure that the main bulk of the gathering itself is exchange and interaction. The 7th is remember to play. I know some of you, Izzy and some others, come from the creative problem solving community, and some of the research on how important play is for creativity and for groups connecting and collaborating. And so this is a reminder for you as the organizers of an event, but also, to weave play and moments of fun and moments of relaxation into the event itself, but also for you to have fun when you're planning it and doing it, and see what are some fun creative touches or different ways that you can bring in a sense of play. And my final fundamental is to walk through the experience from the participant's perspective and really put yourself in their shoes. A great example of this is you might have an incredible agenda that's a beautiful story that has so much interaction and some moments for play and creativity woven in. And then you actually think about, okay, how are people feeling when they arrive into the space? We have a bunch of people flying in from the West Coast. They're probably going to be exhausted from their flight. Does starting the next day at 8 a.m. in the morning really feel good to them from their perspective? I think so often events are planned from an intellectual perspective, like, oh, great, this is a great story. This makes a lot of sense. This experience really builds on itself and gets people to the emotional state that I want them to be in when they leave. But we haven't actually thought through the human experience of the people joining. Like, are they traveling from a long way away? Breaks are super important. This is something that we have a really firm boundary around, is having minimum an hour lunch break in an in-person session. And we never have a working lunch. It's always time for people to take care of themselves and do whatever they need to do individually. For people who are more introverted, being in a full day workshop or retreat can be really draining. And that time to step away is so important. Not just to, check your messages and take care of things, but maybe to go for a walk outside, get some fresh air, reset your energy away from the group. So this is really, really important. We also recommend taking breaks every 90 minutes or so within a session. And a break should be minimum 15 minutes for people to actually have space to take care of their needs, get water, obviously make sure that you're feeding people nourishing food that isn't going to completely mess up their blood sugar levels. So that's all the human side of things. And then this is also thinking through the emotional arc. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but if this is an all new team and a lot of them have never met each other before, is it really going to feel good to ask them to do something really vulnerable as the first activity, or open up in a really deep way before, with people that they are meeting for the first time? So really think about the context of your group. How might they be feeling? Where are they coming in from? And really, make sure that you're designing something that is appropriate and suitable and takes care of the people who are coming into this experience, both in terms of their human physical needs and also their emotional energetic needs as well. Those are my fundamental principles. I see a lot of activity in the comments, which I haven't been able to monitor so fully. So I'm going to take a moment to just read through and see if there are any questions. We have one from Kennedy. A junior leader I'm working with has authority to engage or plan the event without me, but I'd like to engage the CEO more directly to ensure alignment with their overall vision. How do I invite the senior leader into the conversation without undermining the junior leader's initiative or efforts? I would say that this is a great opportunity to engage the junior leader in a conversation about this. Some of the things that I shared today, to say, you could even say, I went to this workshop. One of the things that's really important to our success in this event is to engage senior stakeholders. Like, let's think about how we might do that together, and maybe even invite them to lead that or to outreach that in some way. And I think that, yeah, it's really an opportunity for co-creation and to work together on the same team, and maybe even to for this leader who you're working with to step up in a different kind of way. So this is a big part of our philosophy, is how to see things that might be potential challenges as actually opportunities to be generous and to grow and create together. Let's see if there's anything else I missed. Yes, we have a great comment from Margaret. Interaction can be a hard thing to define at retreats. Sometimes, in honoring the expectations of leadership, the casual interaction or flexible time ends up being activities that they like, but may not connect with their more junior staff. For example, happy hours or intense outdoor activities that aren't enjoyable or accessible to people who don't regularly do them. I am really glad you brought up this point, because this is something that all of you here, if you're leading or designing events, will have to contend with, which is the fact that your participants are not a monolith. Every individual in the group will have different needs. Some people are more introverted, some people are more extroverted, people have different learning styles. So it is true that it is really hard to create an experience that feels perfect for every single person. What we do try to do is to acknowledge that diversity and try and at least have one thing that feels more connective or accessible to the different main profiles of people who may be in attendance. So I think this is a really great opportunity for you to engage your leadership in conversation to say, hey, if these are our goals, if we want to bring people together, like, would you be open to trying, this thing instead that might, bring more of our junior folks into the conversation in a deeper way? But I'm really glad you brought this point up, because there is often tension as a designer between the different needs of the different groups. And I think as the event organizer, you have an incredible opportunity to also make space for the people whose maybe needs get addressed the least. So people who are more junior, people who are on the other side of power dynamics. If you're organizing and facilitating an event, you have the power to create an experience that can cater to and meet the needs of people who maybe usually are the least cared for in your workplace. So that's something that I really encourage you all to think about is is that, and like, what are the different needs at play, and how can you create a balance, and especially, care for your more junior people, or your people who may not usually be in an environment that's most supportive for them. So those are my fundamentals, and thank you for this great conversation and dialogue in the comments. I'm really appreciating it and learning a lot from all of you. I want to transition on this topic to some inclusive facilitation tools that you can use. And these are great not just for retreats, but also for any meeting that you may be leading or facilitating. The first one is having really clear agreements. This may seem really basic, but again, I've often found that in workplaces especially, there are a lot of unspoken norms. And people assume, especially for new people or more junior people, that it's assumed how you're supposed to show up, how you're supposed to behave, how you're supposed to contribute. And that's not actually obvious to a lot of people. So when you explicitly state agreements, you make it possible for everyone to relax, because they know, okay, this is how I'm supposed to show up to this meeting. This is what I'm supposed to contribute. You may want to have different types of agreements for different types of sessions. So for example, a creative ideation session where your goal is to generate as many ideas as possible will have different agreements or ways of showing up as maybe a budgeting meeting where you're trying to decide and make decisions in a really concise and efficient way. So you want to really think about what's the purpose of this meeting or session, and what are the guidelines of behavior that would really support me. This is also great for you as a facilitator if you do have particular interpersonal dynamics or really strong voices in the room that you think you might need to rein in at some point or another. Is getting everyone right at the start to agree to certain agreements gives you that permission. You can even ask the group, hey, as your facilitator, would you be open to me keeping us on track with these agreements and making sure they're honored, so that you have that buy-in and permission from the group to rein them in, to guide them back to what they agreed to if you need to. These are some example agreements that we use in our Inheritance Project workshops that are mostly community dialogues or conversations about inheritance, identity, or training programs. So these are some of the agreements we use, but you'll want to use really different ones depending on the context of the event. The second tool that I love is called Stream of Consciousness Writing. This is where you give everyone 5 to 10 minutes to write uninterrupted on a topic before anyone shares their perspective. I've noticed that in a lot of workplaces, the norm is to just ask a question and then open the floor for anyone to chime in and share their thoughts. And this actually is not the best way of inviting contributions from most people's learning and communication styles. That, just opening the floor to anyone really favors people who are verbal processors, who can think quickly on their feet, and who are more extroverted, and also maybe feel more comfortable speaking up for whatever reason, whether it's their background or tenure at the organization. And so when you give everyone the opportunity to write down their thoughts, to have an intentional moment of reflection, it actually levels the playing field a little bit and gives everyone the ability, especially people who are more introverted or need more time to process or come up with ideas, to really collect their thoughts and maybe feel more confident sharing and contributing. And the last inclusive facilitation tool that I'll share for today is timeshares, which is so simple but so transformative. The principle is simply to give every single person in the meeting or in the breakout group. We usually do this in small breakout groups of 3 to 4 people in each. And every single person in the group has the same amount of time to share about the topic. We usually do 3 to 4 minutes. And this is so powerful because it disrupts traditional dynamics in conversations and traditional power dynamics. So again, I've been talking a lot about those teams, which I'm sure we've all been on, where, you know, the same couple people are dominating the conversation and it's hard for other people to get a word in edgeways. This is a really powerful tool to disrupt those dynamics, because when you are not talking, you have to just listen to this person, and everyone knows they're going to have a chance to speak. So people can relax more and not worry about, okay, this person's almost done talking. Now I need to think about what I'm going to say and can I insert myself in this conversation? It just releases all of that and gives people space to actually share completely and to really listen deeply to other people's contributions and perspectives, which may be really different from their own. And so we find this really valuable, especially around topics where they may be highly charged emotions, strong differences of opinion on the team, or, you know, times when you really want to get contributions from everyone, including maybe your more junior team members or people outside the department who've been invited in. This is a really great way to make sure that everyone has an intentional space and they're invited to contribute. So this is, you know, one of the slides we use in our workshop. We usually do timeshares. Then we give each breakout group a chance to reflect and respond to each other after they've listened to every single person. And then we get the full group back together and share the insights. And I found that using this tool in groups really creates a different dynamic where people are more likely and willing to engage in real dialogue, real listening, and considering of other people's perspectives, instead of what I often used to see in some of the executive retreats that I would facilitate is, you know, people wanting to prove that they're right and to get their idea through and their idea passed. And the problem with that is that when we get into an oppositional dynamic of your idea versus my idea, and that becomes the point, we actually lose the end goal of what we're trying to all work towards and achieve together. So using timeshares is also a really powerful way to create this sense of collaboration. Like, you're all here in it together. We're all here creating a solution or creating ideas together. So those are 3 of some our favorite inclusive facilitation tools. There are so many of these that we have and use at Inheritance Project. This is just a few, and we teach all of these and more in our inclusive leadership trainings. We have one at the moment going on. I know some of you here are in that course. We're actually doing another cohort of the same inclusive leadership program next spring. So if you're excited to dive more into these, you could have the chance to enroll in that program as an individual. We also love coming into organizations to teach these kinds of tools and really embed them in your workplace culture. We actually have a train the trainer program around this too, so that you know, if you work for a large organization and you want to have a core group of leaders who are trained in this philosophy and this methodology, who can then go out and train others in how to facilitate and lead in this way. We also love to do that. And so at the end of the session, I'll put my contact information in the comments. So if that sounds intriguing to you or you want to learn more about how that works, I would love to connect with you. And I'm going to open it up for questions in a few moments. But the one last topic that is probably one of just my pet favorite topics is why are icebreakers so awkward? And I spend a lot of time reflecting on this as someone who designs and facilitates events. And my philosophy on this has actually evolved and changed over time. I'd love to know actually in the comments any super awkward icebreaker experiences that you've had throughout the course of your career and why you felt that it was so awkward or uncomfortable. And I'll share my experience, which is I think that this, icebreakers really not landing or feeling awkward comes from the facilitator or the organizer not putting themselves in the shoes of the people facilitating or the people participating in the event. So like I mentioned before, if you have a team of all new people who've never met each other before, people are going to be a little more hesitant or nervous, or, they're worried about making a good impression on the other people. So you might want to invite them to do something really different than a group of people who've worked together for years. They're really comfortable with each other. They hang out all the time outside work and socialize. You could probably, do a different type of exercise. So I'm not going to tell you like this icebreaker is always great because it's not true. It's all about context. It's all about the context of your group. And usually an icebreaker feels awkward because it's not the right fit of the type of activity, the level of depth and vulnerability, or the level of pushing people outside their comfort zone that's actually appropriate for the context of the group. So my invitation to you is to really consider the context of your group. Who are the introverts? Who are the extroverts? Do people know each other? Do people not? What cultures are people coming from? If you have an international group with people coming from all over the world, there'll be very different social norms, and that's really something important to consider. But that icebreaker, that first activity, is actually a moment for trust building. Trust building for you as the organizer or facilitator with the group, and trust building for the group with each other. And sometimes doing something that's super fun and light isn't actually what's going to be of service to building trust. So I would love to reframe icebreakers from breaking the ice to this is your opening trust building exercise. And I think that will be someone who, or I think that will be, oh, and I love this in the comments from Dasha, icebreaker, a dedicated person who goes around connecting and introducing people based on shared interests. I love this. So that's a way to connect people and build trust that invites people in, invites people to feel safe rather than pushing people outside of their comfort zone right away, which I used to work on a team where that was the philosophy. Like right away, we want to make people uncomfortable and shake them up. But I actually now don't think that that's actually of service. I really do believe now that we want to start off any event or session with an opportunity to help people feel at ease, invited in, and to build trust and connection with the group. So one of the exercises that we use for this at Inheritance Project is what we call the inheritance object exercise. And this, again, may not actually be appropriate for every single group. You have to consider the group's context and the environment. But the reason that I like it for a lot of different groups is because it has a really strong element of choice. So people can choose what they bring. And the inheritance object, the prompt is to bring an object that's meaningful to you, your background, your inheritance, or your culture in some way. And so this gives people the choice about what to share. If they're, meeting someone for the first time, they can pick something that they feel comfortable presenting to others. And this is also something that we communicate in advance of the session. So people have several weeks to think about it, to reflect. They know that's how we're going to start off the day. So they don't arrive and are like thrown off immediately. They arrive and they're ready and prepared to do something. And so this really helps people who don't like being put on the spot or are more introverted if they can have time in advance to prepare and know what they're going to share. We also usually do a really quick stream of consciousness writing before this too, so that people have a chance to write down their thoughts and collect their thoughts before they share it with the group as well, which also makes it more inviting. I also love the suggestion from Izzy to bring something that represents them at their best selves, which is another great idea. So yeah, this general theme of bringing something that represents an element that you want to draw out from the people in the room, and giving them choice and advanced preparation can really, really help. So that's my little rant about icebreakers because I think that a lot of times the profession of facilitation gets a bad rap because so many people have such uncomfortable experiences with icebreakers, and it's honestly because I believe the facilitators aren't taking the care and responsibility to figure out the context and needs of the group and how to invite people in and help them feel at ease from the start. So those are a lot of some of my thoughts and reflections. Obviously, it's really hard to sum up. On in the Inheritance Project co-founding team, we have combined many, many decades of experience facilitating retreats and events like this. I've just distilled a very small amount of this wisdom into this hour, and I'm really curious if anyone has any other questions or reflections that they want to share in the comments. I'm open to answer any specific questions you have about events that you're planning, retreats that you have coming up, or anything else. And while you write those in the chat, I'll share that we have another great event coming up next month. It will be led by Katya. It's called From Conflict to Connection. And this, we do one free, open to the public workshop or event on LinkedIn per month. And this next one is focused on conflict resolution techniques and strategies, which is obviously top of mind given everything that's going on in the world in recent years. And also, as leaders, as people who are responsible for convening groups and bringing groups together, having these kinds of tools and techniques can be so essential, so that when, if you're ever in a situation where you're guiding a group and something erupts, or there's some really intense emotionally charged conflict that happens, you can be the calm, stable presence that can guide people back towards a place of connection and collaboration. So if you want to join that event, I'm going to post it in the I can't post in the comments now. I'll post in the comments later. And we would love to see you there. A big part of our philosophy at Inheritance Project, while we are a social impact company. So while we work with businesses and organizations of all types, but fundamentally we do this work because we really want a world where people from all backgrounds can come together and collaborate in more powerful ways, can come together and work together from a place of shared understanding, from empathy, from respect, from trust, because the state of the world right now is really intense, and the world needs all of our contributions, our ideas, and our collaboration. So we really want to, want to spread the word about these techniques, these tools, these ideas, this work, so that more and more people can be invited into that space of collaboration and more human-centered workplaces. Oh, and we have one question, which is, how do you help people understand inheritance object? Usually we don't call it that. That's more of our internal name for it. In the email or message they get in advance, we usually say something like, bring an object that is meaningful to you, your cultural background or your inheritance. You can even say, don't overthink it. Bring the first thing that comes to mind. You'll have a minute or two to share about the object at the beginning of our session. So yeah, that's usually how we introduce it to people, is by, not just calling it inheritance object, but explaining the whole language around it. You can also add something like, obviously one object can't sum up the depth and complexity of who you are as a human, but it's an opportunity for us to just learn a little bit more about each other, which can help take the pressure off too. Any other thoughts, reflections, or comments before we close? I'll give it about one more minute. Great. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you. Just want to thank you all for being here today, for being so engaged in the comments. If you need any further support with your retreat or events coming up, feel free to get in touch. I would love to connect with you. And if you're interested in bringing more inclusive facilitation and inclusive leadership tools to your workplace, I would love to connect with you as well. Thank you all so much.